Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah. I want you to repeat after me. I can be anything.
I can be anything.
Without limitations.
Without limitations.
I can go anywhere.
I can go anywhere.
Without borders.
Without borders.
All right, just run it back one more time, all right? I can be anything.
I can be anything.
Without limitations.
Without limitations.
I can go anywhere.
I can go anywhere.
Without any borders.
Without any borders.
My name is Christian Moore. I'm a 2016-17 Public Ally, and I've spent the last 10 months creating Black Kid Magic alongside Bible Center Church, where every day we take that mantra and create it to live true in our lives. Research suggests that students make up their mind whether or not they like science by the third grade. For many Black youth, that window closes before they knew it was ever open. For many of these students, just the fact they show up to school makes them an anomaly. And the fact that they can read and write at grade level makes them a prodigy among their peers. As a result, preparing these students for prosperous futures means preparing them for April state testing, because so much funding and job retention opportunities are directly related to the results of these tests. One thing about the city of Pittsburgh, it is a prime example that we are moving from a labor economy to a knowledge economy. When you look at where the steel mills are, now they're tech firms. Even in this very room, we are surrounded by technology, and Academy of Pittsburgh actually has classes that teach people how to code. But the problem with this is that our Black kids are getting left behind. They don't have these resources or access to these resources. When they look in the magazines, they don't see people in these tech spaces that look like them, or in the science field that look like them. So my thing is, how can you aspire to be someone or something when no one in that space looks like you? So the question is, what happens when we care about that? When we reject that narrative and say no more, that the tech space and the science space belongs to our Black children, and that they have a spot in our future. My placement has allowed me to answer that question of what happens when we care about this. On my first day of placement, my supervisor told me that I would be tasked with creating a robotics program. It was a pilot program never done before, and I was in charge of it. And I was like, I'm pretty sure you read my resume, and I'm pretty sure nothing on there said science or technology or robotics. So what are you talking about? I remember in that moment being so frightened, but equally excited, because when I was in college, I knew that I wanted to use my degree to help Black youth, but I did not think it would come in this form. And knowing that this critical age range is where they decide whether or not they like science technology, I didn't want to be the reason that they didn't like it. But fast forward to 10 months later, by the end of our program, through my efforts, we were able to interact with 40 additional students that we had never came in contact with before. As far as PISY is concerned, that looks great. That means I hit my requirements. But one thing I learned from my good friend, Jamelia Kamara, is the importance of outcomes over egos. And that numbers just aren't enough. It has to be more. One thing that stuck out to me while I was facilitating this program, we did a pre-test and a post-test. During the pre-test, 70% of the students had a negative view of failure. By the end of the program, it was a complete flip. 70% of the students had a positive view of failure, and 100% of them realized that sometimes it takes more than one try in order to be successful. And the reason why this happened wasn't because I wrote a curriculum that had 60 lessons, or because I dedicated 20 minutes a week during this lunch group to teach them about robotics. It was because I cared, and I did more than the minimum. So my time with these kids was not a romanticized process. It was very stressful. A lot of days, they probably hated me. And some days I was like, yeah, I should probably use one of my vacation days right about now. But with that, we also learned a lot of lessons together. One thing I was able to teach these children is that what makes them different does not need to be disciplined, it needs to be developed. I'll repeat that. What makes them different does not need to be disciplined, it needs to be developed. There's one of the students in my class, he loves rapping. I mean, this dude is like probably going to be the next Kendrick Lamar in about 15 years. Any chance he get, he's trying to freestyle or battle rap me, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to teach you about this robot. This is not the time. But one thing that was cool was for that reason, a lot of times he would get in trouble in class. But I started to think, okay, this is his passion. Now, how can I make that mix of robots? On the surface level, you probably think there's no way possible. But I was determined to find a way. So during one of our lessons, the task was we were going to create a stop motion movie using one of the Lego robots he created. And knowing that his passion was rapping, not only did I teach him about making the robots in STEAM, but I also allowed him to make our soundtrack for the movie. And in that moment, when I allowed him to be himself and showing that what makes him different is okay and that it's beautiful, the way he responded to our program changed. Instead of not wanting to come, he showed up every single day. He wanted to be my assistant every single day. It was a beautiful transformation. And these things rang true for so many of the kids in our program. Another child suffered from anger issues. And I remember one time just taking the time out to walk her back to class and asking her, okay, what makes you angry? How do you feel in that moment? And in that moment, I shared that I used to have anger problems as well when I was a kid, and how I hated being in school because of that, because I would always get written up by my teachers. So we were able to bounce ideas off each other to deal with our anger, and through that we created a friendship, and it all started with these robots. The second lesson that I taught these children was the power of collaboration. Another one of our lessons was to use, these kids, they invented self-driving cars. And we were to use them to make the world's first driverless car parade. And so with this lesson, they create parade floats that match their passions. And this process is very stressful because these kids are perfectionists, #Dupree. So when things didn't go their way, they would get upset, or when their idea wasn't the idea that we went with, they became very upset, disengaged, etc. And I noticed this, but I knew in my own life the power of collaboration. So instead of always jumping in to remedy a situation, I allowed them to fix it themselves. I stepped back and let them know they were capable of pushing through the adversity, pushing through the disagreements to create something beautiful. And that's exactly what they did. And these two things combined, the power of collaboration and owning their differences, made the last thing possible, which was the purpose of this group, was to teach them 21st century skills. Through analyzing themselves and finding their identity within a group, they were able to develop 21st century skills, such as thinking systematically and critically. When they mess up on something, instead of throwing the robot across the room like they did weeks 1 through 3, they kept at it. They figured it out. And this allowed them to create things that even I probably would never think of. It was like an alarm that wakes you up with like wind instead of sound. Like it's really ingenious ideas. So in this role, I taught these kids a lot, but in return, they taught me a lot about myself. One lesson that I realized is that when you care about others, you begin to care more about yourself, because you realize how valuable you are in the lives of other people, and it makes you find value in your own life. So for me, I started getting up earlier. I started eating better because I knew these kids come into this space with massive energy. And if I'm in there wiping my eye or yawning, they're going to do the same thing. How can I expect them to be engaged if I'm not hyped myself about science? And that was just really transformative for me. It made me want to go back into the gym because these kids had me running around. And I'm like, look, I'm fat, so either you're going to start running or I'm going to have to keep up with you. So I kept up with them. And the second thing that I learned is that greatness is within me. This whole time when I created this curriculum, my mindset was like, okay, I want to tell these kids that you are Black kid magic. That was my goal. But in return, they taught me that I am Black man magic, and that I am capable of anything, and that I have the ability to cultivate spaces that inspire, that push you beyond your limits, and that let you know you are truly unstoppable. And so through this, I developed a personal quote that says, "We are all teachers, and our actions are the curriculum." So as I look at all of you, for the last 10 months, we've all been teachers. and our actions have created curriculum in the lives of the families and youth and organizations we serve. And as you move forward, I want you to keep that in your mind and let that ring true in your heart, that you are a teacher, that everything you do, everything you bring to this world is valuable. And for me, I'm going to embody that myself. These kids have inspired me to go harder and go higher. And so this summer, I'm going to launch a summer tour where I'm going to be speaking to different organizations here in Pittsburgh, Ohio, West Virginia, and New Jersey to get Black high school students excited about college, to educate them about the process, and letting them know that through education, you can have an unstoppable future, which takes me back to the mantra that I can be anything without limitations, that I can go anywhere without borders, and I'm taking the whole world with me. Thank you.